Most gardeners are, well, addicted to digging. They till every season flip compost constantly and rebuild beds from scratch as if soil were, disposable. Then they wonder why their fertility disappears after 2 or 3 seasons, why watering becomes a daily chore, and why yields slowly decline even though they're adding organic matter. The problem isn't that they're not working hard enough, it's that they're disturbing a system that was actually designed to build itself. Ancient hugelkultur works because it stops that cycle of destruction. It builds fertility from the bottom up and then leaves it alone long enough to become stable. And if you're serious about growing better food year after year, subscribe to the channel now, because this is the kind of practical soil strategy that actually compounds over time. Hugelkultur didn't come from permaculture influences. It came from Central and Eastern European farming traditions, particularly in regions that are now part of Germany and Austria. Farmers buried wood not because it was trendy, but because they understood something modern gardeners ignore. Decaying wood is a long-term water reservoir and a slow-release carbon engine. The biggest mistake people make with hugelkultur is building a pile of random wood and covering it with a thin layer of soil. That's not hugelkultur. That's a nitrogen robbery waiting to happen. When you bury wood deeply, you're not just adding carbon, you're creating a sponge. Hardwood logs, oak, beech, maple, absorb winter moisture and release it slowly through summer. In my own raised beds, a properly built hugelkultur core reduced irrigation by about 30 to 40% after the first year. That's not theory, that's measured hose time and water meter readings. But here's the trade-off. Fresh wood consumes nitrogen during decomposition. If you ignore that, your crops will stall. Leaves yellow, growth slows. Gardeners blame pests or weather when the real issue is nitrogen immobilization. The solution isn't complicated. When I build a hugelkultur bed, I use roughly a 3-to-1 ratio by volume, 3 parts woody material to 1 part nitrogen-rich material. That nitrogen layer can be fresh grass clippings, manure that's at least partially composted, green prunings, or even, diluted urine at about 1:10 with water if you're working on a small backyard system. That nitrogen charge prevents the wood from stealing nutrients from your crops during the first growing season. If I'm working in-ground in a backyard, I trench about 40 to 60 centimeters deep. That's important. Shallow burial dries out too fast. The trench width depends on the bed, but for a standard 1.2 meter wide bed, I'll fill the center 60 to 80 centimeters with wood, leaving soil on either side. The bottom layer gets the largest logs, ideally 10 to 20 centimeters in diameter. On top of that, I stack smaller branches to fill voids. Then comes the nitrogen layer, 5 to 10 centimeters thick. Then I backfill with the excavated soil, mixing in compost at about 20% by volume in the top 20 centimeters where roots will establish. In raised beds, especially ones about 40 centimeters tall, I treat the bottom third as the wood zone. If the bed is 30 centimeters tall or less, just skip hugelkultur. You really don't have enough depth to buffer nitrogen drawdown or moisture properly. The goal isn't height. Ancient systems often created mounded beds, but height was a byproduct of burying wood deeply, not the objective. In a small urban garden, a flat hugelkultur bed works just as well and is honestly easier to manage. The first 2 seasons require some discipline. Year 1 is all about establishment. Don't expect miracles right away. Plant heavy feeders like squash, tomatoes or corn, but make sure to support them with supplemental nitrogen. I side dress with composted poultry manure at about 500 grams per square meter, usually around mid-season. By year 2, the system really starts to stabilize. fungal networks expand, soil texture changes noticeably, and you can push productivity a bit harder. By year 3, irrigation drops dramatically. In one 4 by 1.2 meter bed I built 8 years ago, I now water deeply once every 10 to 14 days during peak summer heat. The surrounding conventional bed still needs water every 4 to 5 days. The reason is simple. Wood becomes a microbial condominium. Fungi colonize it, bacteria follow, and earthworms move in. You stop fighting evaporation because the system stores and redistributes moisture internally. No-dig isn't about laziness. It's about protecting soil structure. Every time you till, you shred fungal hyphae and oxidize organic matter. In a hugelkultur bed, fungal networks are the backbone of nutrient cycling. Disturbing them resets the clock. Instead of digging, a top dress, 2 to 3 centimeters of compost once or twice a year is enough. That's roughly 20 to 30 liters per square meter annually. Over time, the bed rises slightly as organic matter accumulates, but the wood core continues to shrink slowly, feeding the system from below. If you're used to double digging every season, this feels counterintuitive. But in every long-term comparison I've done, undisturbed hugelkultur beds outperform annually tilled beds in both soil moisture retention and long-term organic matter levels. In raised beds, hugelkultur accelerates soil maturity. A new raised bed filled with bagged soil can take years to develop structure, adding a buried wood core speeds that process dramatically because fungi establish quickly in the carbon-rich environment. In-ground systems, they take a bit longer to show dramatic improvement, but over time, they become much more stable. The key is that the surrounding native soil actually connects to the bed, which allows for deeper root penetration and, honestly, better mineral exchange. Now, if you're working in sandy soil, hugelkultur can be absolutely transformative. The wood in the system increases water retention dramatically, but in heavy clay, things get a bit more nuanced. The wood will help improve aeration, but you really have to address drainage first. If water's sitting in the trench for days, you need to fix the drainage before burying any logs, or else you'll just end up creating anaerobic pockets. I run hydroponic systems too, and well, this might sound unrelated at first, but it really isn't. Hydroponics teaches you precision nutrient management, while hugelkultur teaches long-term nutrient buffering. In hydroponics, you're controlling EC and pH on a daily basis. In hugelkultur, the decaying wood and fungal networks buffer nutrients slowly over the course of years. They don't spike and crash the way synthetic feeding schedules can. I've even used partially decomposed wood chips from an old hugelkultur core as a biological inoculant in hydroponic media blends. When you blend those at about 10% by volume with cocoa coir in a non-recirculating system, it increases microbial diversity and root resilience without clogging lines. You wouldn't want to run that in a sterile NFT system, but in drip-fed containers, it actually works surprisingly well. The wood you choose matters more than people admit. Hardwoods last longer. Softwoods decompose faster. Avoid treated lumber completely. Avoid black walnut because of juglone. If you're not sure about species, let it weather for a year before burying it. I prefer partially rotted logs when possible. They absorb water immediately and are already colonized by fungi. Completely dry, fresh-cut wood will take a full season to hydrate properly. And size matters. Logs thicker than 25 centimeters take decades to break down and can create voids if not packed tightly. Branches thinner than 2 centimeters break down too quickly to provide long-term benefit. A mix of sizes between 5 and 15 centimeters gives the best balance of structure and decomposition rate. Why most modern advice gets hugelkultur wrong? The internet loves giant mounds that look impressive in year 1 and slump by year 3. That's because they're built too high and too loose. Ancient systems were practical. Stability mattered more than aesthetics. Also, hugelkultur is not a shortcut to avoid composting. It complements composting. Compost feeds the topsoil immediately. Wood feeds the subsoil slowly. Together, they create a layered nutrient timeline. If someone tells you hugelkultur eliminates the need for fertilizer forever, they're overselling it. Heavy production gardens still remove nutrients through harvest. You must replenish. The difference is you're supporting a self-regulating system rather than constantly correcting deficiencies. What decades of soil fertility actually looks like. In long-term hugelkultur beds, soil becomes dark, crumbly and fungal dominant. Earthworms are constant. Water infiltration is rapid, yet moisture is retained deep below. Crop roots travel further and thicker. Pest pressure often declines because plants are better nourished and less stressed. The real payoff isn't just yield, it's resilience. During drought years, these beds hold on. During heavy rain, they drain without suffocating roots. That stability is what ancient growers were after. Not hype, not novelty, stability. If you're serious about long-term soil fertility, build once and protect it. Bury carbon deeply, charge it with nitrogen, cover it with living roots, then stop digging it up every season. That's how you turn a garden into an ecosystem instead of a project. If this kind of practical, field-tested knowledge helps you grow better food, subscribe to the Farm Logic channel and share this video with someone who's still exhausting their soil every season. The more growers understand how to build fertility that compounds instead of collapses, the better food we all produce.